The botanist's reclamation. The silence in the conference room was more brutal than any shouting match could have been. My own research team, the people who had mentored me, laughed at my findings. Dr. Collins, my former mentor, said, his voice laced with condescension, "Your urban soil regeneration theory is an impractical fantasy. Cities weren't meant to grow food, they're concrete jungles, and you're living in a dream world." I sat there, my cheeks burning, as they systematically dismantled 5 years of my life's work. The presentation I had poured my soul into was reduced to well-intentioned but fundamentally flawed. When the chair of the department called it scientifically irresponsible, I felt the ground shift beneath me. In that moment, I wasn't just losing my position, I was losing my identity, my belief in a future where science could heal our broken relationship with the earth. I walked out of that university, my head held high despite the ache in my chest, and knew I had to leave the formal research world behind. My family had always called me the dreamer, the one who wasted her potential on unrealistic notions. Now they would be proven right. But something in me refused to accept that verdict. I moved to the city not to abandon my vision but to reinvent it. I became an urban guerrilla farmer, a botanical ghost transforming forgotten corners of concrete landscapes into thriving ecosystems. My first project was a tiny patch of land between two abandoned buildings in the poorest neighborhood. The soil was compacted, poisoned by years of neglect, but I remembered my research. The principles were sound, even if my former colleagues couldn't see it. For months, I worked alone, hauling compost under the cover of dawn, experimenting with deep-rooted plants that could break through the concrete-like soil. Neighbors watched me with suspicion. "Why waste your time?" an elderly man asked one morning. "This land is dead." "I don't believe in dead land," I replied, smiling as I planted my first seedlings. "I believe in second chances." My family called me weekly, their voices heavy with disappointment. "When are you coming home?" my mother would ask. "When will you find a real job?" "I'm doing what I love, Mom," I'd say, though my voice often trembled. The first year was brutal. My projects were mocked as eccentric hobbies by city officials. My family suggested therapy, but I persisted. I documented everything: soil composition, plant growth, community response. Slowly, miraculously, the barren patches began to transform. Deep-rooted plants broke up the compacted soil, worms returned, birds nested in the shrubs I planted. Children who once played among rubble now helped harvest tomatoes and herbs from our community gardens. By year 3, my guerrilla farming had caught the attention of urban planners and environmental groups. What had begun as one patch had expanded to 12 across the city, each more vibrant than the last. The soil, I had been told, was irreparable, now supported complex ecosystems. The neighborhoods where I worked saw a 40% reduction in food insecurity as families grew their own produce. When international environmental organizations began featuring my work, the invitations to speak at conferences started rolling in. I declined most, until one invitation arrived that made me pause. It was from my former university, asking me to keynote their annual sustainability symposium. "We would be honored to learn from your pioneering work in urban ecological regeneration," the invitation read. I accepted, but my real reason for saying yes wasn't the university, it was my family. I had received word that my father's health was failing, and my mother had asked me to come home. I had achieved success beyond my wildest dreams, but there was still one reckoning left, one conversation that needed to happen. When I arrived at my childhood home, the atmosphere was tense. My family sat around the dining table, their expressions a mixture of concern and what looked suspiciously like pity. "I heard you're still playing in the dirt," my brother said, unable to hide his skepticism. "I'm not just playing," I replied, placing a small container on the table. "I'm healing." I opened the container to reveal soil samples from my most successful project. "This is what they told me was impossible," I said softly. "This is the soil from a neighborhood that was declared a dead zone 5 years ago." I pulled out my tablet, showing them time-lapse photos of barren lots transformed into lush food forests. "This neighborhood used to be a food desert. Now they grow enough food to feed 300 families year-round." My mother's eyes filled with tears. I never understood. "You couldn't," I said gently, "because I couldn't explain it in ways that made sense then. But now look." I showed them images of my work featured in environmental journals, videos of community celebrations in the neighborhoods I had transformed, graphs showing the dramatic improvement in soil health and biodiversity. What you called wasting my potential was actually fulfilling my purpose, I said, meeting each of their eyes. What you called unrealistic was actually ahead of its time. My father, who had been quiet throughout, reached across the table and took my hand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We all are. That day, I didn't just reclaim my professional dignity, I healed a rift with the people who mattered most. My family didn't just see a successful botanist, they saw a woman who had turned rejection into purpose, who had transformed concrete into life, and who had proven that sometimes the most impractical dreams are the ones that change the world. The greatest revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's living so authentically that your success becomes undeniable, your purpose undeniable, and your happiness impossible to question. That's the reclamation that matters most.